Luke Brennan woke up before the sun the way he always did, not because he liked mornings, but because the little house in Maple Creek demanded it. The single-story home sat on the edge of a small Ohio town where everyone knew everyone, the kind of place with one main street, one grocery store, and one high school. Their house used to be bright white, but now the paint had faded to a tired gray, and the crooked mailbox leaned like it was as exhausted as Luke felt. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old coffee and laundry detergent, and somewhere down the hall a television murmured, because it hardly ever got turned off the right way anymore. Luke swung his legs out of bed, feeling the dull ache in his lower back from too many years lifting tires and bending over engines at the auto shop. His alarm read 5:12 a.m. He rubbed his eyes, pulled on his worn t-shirt and flannel pajama pants, and stepped into the hallway, his bare feet cold on the hardwood floor. The soft glow of the TV lit the living room in flashes of blue. His father, Tom Brennan, sat crooked in his old recliner, his gray hair sticking up in every direction, a blanket twisted around his legs and an empty cereal bowl teetering on the arm of the chair. "Dad," Luke said quietly. Tom squinted up at him, blinking as if the room had just appeared. "You're home early from school," he said. The words hit Luke like a small, familiar sting. "Yeah, Dad," he answered softly. "Real early." He stepped closer and put a steadying hand on his father's shoulder. "Come on, let's get you to bed. It's still dark out." Tom frowned at the window like it had betrayed him. "Dark? I was just watching the game. The Buckeyes were on." "That was yesterday," Luke said, his voice gentle. "Remember." He wanted to correct him, to push the truth into the places Alzheimer's had hollowed out, but he had learned that arguing with the disease didn't fix anything. It only made his father upset and made Luke feel like the bad guy. So he swallowed the frustration and helped the older man stand. Once, Tom had seemed taller than the world itself, a broad-shouldered army veteran who could lift Luke onto his shoulders without effort. Now his body felt lighter, smaller, like someone had let the air out of him. They walked slowly down the hallway, Tom's hand dragging along the wall, fingertips brushing framed photos that lined the narrow space. In one picture, a much younger Tom stood in his army uniform, sharp-eyed, the American flag behind him. In another, Luke and his little sister, Hannah, grinned with chocolate ice cream smeared across their faces, summer sunlight making everything look golden. Tom stopped in front of that one, staring at it as if it were a painting in a museum. "Ha," he murmured, his brow wrinkling. "I know them." "You should," Luke said quietly. "That's us, Dad. Me and Hannah. You took that picture." "I did?" Tom asked, genuinely surprised. "Yeah," Luke said, forcing a small smile. "You did." He guided his father into the bedroom, helped him sit on the edge of the bed, and pulled the covers up over his legs. When he reached for the lamp, Tom's voice stopped him. "Hey, kid." Luke turned. "Yeah." Tom's eyes were shiny in the dim light. "I did my best, you know," he said. "I know I messed up. But I did my best." The words caught Luke off guard. Alzheimer's had this strange way of opening doors in his father's mind at random, letting old guilt and half-remembered apologies slip out. Luke felt his throat tighten. He didn't know if he believed that his dad had done his best, not after all the yelling and the drinking when he was younger, the broken plates and slammed doors, his mom's red eyes. But standing there looking at this fragile version of the man he used to fear and admire at the same time, Luke couldn't bring himself to do anything but nod. "I know, Dad," he said, even if it wasn't entirely true. "Get some sleep, okay?" He turned off the lamp and eased the door closed, then let his forehead rest against the cool wood for a moment while he took a long breath. It was 5:29 a.m. In less than an hour, he had to be at the auto shop. Before that, he needed to start the coffee, get his father's morning pills ready, and double-check the calendar taped to the fridge. In the small kitchen, the overhead light flicked on with a tired hum. The fridge was covered in magnets, some shaped like flags and eagles, others from long-ago gas stations and diners. In the center, held by a yellow ribbon magnet, was a worn photo of his parents on their wedding day. His mom wore a simple cream dress and a nervous smile, his dad a suit that didn't quite fit, but his chest puffed out like he'd just won a medal. She was gone now. She'd left when Luke was 15, done with the shouting, done with the booze, done with trying to fix a man who refused to admit he was broken. According to a postcard Hannah had tracked down online, she lived in Florida now, remarried, surrounded by palm trees and sunlight. Luke poured water into the coffee maker and listened to it sputter to life. He pulled out the pill organizer and checked the labels twice. Monday, AM pills. These were for memory, for mood, for blood pressure, for all the ways his father's body and mind had started to betray him. He dropped 2 slices of cheap bread into the toaster, the generic brand they bought because every dollar had to stretch. His eyes drifted back to the calendar on the fridge. Each square was filled with careful notes in his messy handwriting. Refill prescription, check insurance, call VA, doctor at 3 p.m., and, in big red letters on an upcoming Thursday, VA, memory clinic. The toast popped. He slapped a little butter on the slices and set them on a plate. At 6:15, Tom shuffled into the kitchen, his hair flattened on one side from the pillow. "Smells good," he said, sniffing the air. "Your mom making pancakes?" The question hit Luke in the chest. "No, Dad," he answered, pushing the plate toward him. "Just toast. Just me." Tom sat down, picking up a slice with shaking fingers. His eyes focused on Luke, studying him as if trying to place him. "Luke," he said slowly. "Yeah," Luke replied, forcing a small smile. "You got tall," his father said, shaking his head. "When'd that happen?" "Couple decades ago," Luke said, a little laugh leaking out despite the ache in his chest. He pushed the pillbox closer. "Here. Take these with your coffee." Tom stared at the small white pills in his palm. "What are these again?" "They help your memory," Luke said. "Or they're supposed to." Tom frowned like the idea offended him, then swallowed them and chased them with coffee, wincing at the bitterness. "I don't like forgetting," he said quietly. "Feels like I'm losing pieces of myself, little by little." Luke looked down at the table so his father wouldn't see his eyes water. "Yeah," he murmured. "I know." By 7, Luke had traded pajamas for his worn work jeans and the navy blue jacket with the auto shop logo on the chest. He grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door. "I gotta go, Dad," he said. "Mrs. Carter from next door is coming over at 9 to check on you." His father's face tightened with sudden panic. "Where you going?" he asked. "You left for college once. Your mama cried all day." Luke froze for a moment. "I'm just going to work," he said gently. "At Marvin's Auto. Same place I went yesterday." Tom searched his face, then seemed to relax a little. "Right. You fix cars," he said. "That's what you do." "That's the idea," Luke said. "There's lasagna in the fridge for lunch. I labeled it. Mrs. Carter will heat it up for you." "She's the one with the little dog?" "Yeah. Gizmo," Luke said. "He barks at everyone." Tom smiled faintly. "That dog hates me," he said. "He hates everybody," Luke replied. "You two have that in common." His father let out a wheezy laugh. "Get outta here, smart mouth," he muttered, but there was affection in it, a little flash of the dad Luke remembered from the good days. Outside, the early morning air was cool and smelled like wet grass and exhaust from the highway a few miles away. The sky was just turning pink at the edges. Luke climbed into his old pickup truck, the seat springs poking him through the fabric, and sat there for a second with his hands on the steering wheel. His phone buzzed with another low balance alert from the bank, the kind of notification that had become a regular part of his life. Once, he'd had a different future. He'd had a scholarship to study engineering, a chance to leave Maple Creek behind. He remembered getting the email in his senior year, the way his heart had felt too big for his chest, how his mom had cried in a good way for once, how even his dad had hugged him and said, "You're gonna build something important, kid." Then the forgetting had started. At first it was small things, his father misplacing his keys, repeating stories within the same conversation, burning dinner because he'd wandered off and forgotten the oven was on. Then it got worse. Tom got lost driving home from the grocery store. He couldn't remember how to get to the post office he'd gone to for 20 years. One day, he called Luke and asked him what grade he was in, even though Luke was 20 and taking college classes 2 hours away. The diagnosis came a few months later, early onset Alzheimer's. The doctor had said the words slowly, gently, like it might break the room in half. By then, Hannah was already in Chicago, working long hours in a marketing firm, trying to build a life that didn't revolve around their father's moods and their mother's tears. The phone calls between Luke and his sister turned into arguments. "You can't throw away your future, Luke," Hannah had said, her voice sharp and scared. "We can find a place for him, a good facility." "We can't afford a good facility," he'd answered, staring at the peeling paint on the living room wall. "And even if we could, he's still Dad." "He wasn't much of a dad when we were kids," she had shot back, bitterness leaking into every word. He hadn't had an answer for that. He remembered both the bruised memories and the bright ones. Nights when his father came home smelling like beer and anger, and mornings when he made pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. People, he decided back then, weren't just one thing. They were a pile of good and bad choices stacked together, and sometimes you didn't know which side was heavier until something broke. In the end, someone had to stay. Someone had to drive Tom to his appointments, manage the bills, make sure he didn't leave the stove on or wander off into the street. The scholarship felt like something happening to someone else. Luke withdrew from classes, packed his things back into trash bags, and moved into his old bedroom with the faded posters still on the walls. "Just until it gets really bad," he'd told himself. That was 3 years ago. Now, the auto shop was his world. Marvin, his boss, was kind in a gruff sort of way. A man in his 60s with a round belly and a mustache that seemed permanently stained with coffee. When Luke walked into the shop that morning, the air was thick with the smell of motor oil and rubber. Country music played softly from a radio on a workbench. "Morning, kid," Marvin said, wiping his hands on a rag. "You look like you wrestled a bear." "Just my alarm clock," Luke replied with a tired grin. "Bear would have been easier." "How's your old man doing?" Marvin asked. It was never a casual question. People in town knew about Tom. They knew about his army service, his temper in the old days, and his illness now. "Some days he thinks I'm in high school," Luke said. Today he thought Mom was making pancakes. Marvin let out a low whistle. "Hell of a thing," he said. "My cousin's got the same disease. Keeps putting his wallet in the freezer. Took him 3 days to find it last time." Luke gave a weak laugh. "Dad put the TV remote in the toaster last week. We only noticed when it started to smell like burning plastic." "Well," Marvin said, clapping him on the back, "at least life's never boring." The morning passed in a blur of oil changes, tire rotations, and brake jobs. Luke lost himself in the work, in the comfort of routine and the way a problem with a car usually had a clear solution. If something squeaked, you found it. If something leaked, you fixed it. People paid you, said thank you, and drove away. Life under the hood made more sense than life at home. At lunch, he sat on the back steps of the shop with a ham sandwich in one hand and his phone in the other. There was a text from Hannah, "Call me when you can." The last time he had called, they'd gotten into another argument about money and whose responsibility their father really was. He stared at the message for a long moment, then locked his phone and shoved it back into his pocket. When he finally pulled into the driveway that evening, the sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple, and the air had turned cool. He noticed right away that something was wrong. The front door was not fully closed, it stood half open, just enough to send a jolt of panic through his chest. Tom never left the door open. Luke's keys slipped in his hand as he rushed up the steps. "Dad!" he called, pushing the door wide. The living room TV was on again, some game show flashing and buzzing, but the recliner was empty. The kitchen held an open lasagna pan on the counter, half eaten, and a glass of water near the sink. The pill organizer sat where he had left it, and the back door was locked. "Dad!" he called again, louder now, his heart pounding in his ears. He checked the bedroom. Empty. The bathroom. Empty. The small backyard. Empty. It felt like the house was shrinking around him. A thin layer of sweat broke out along his neck. He rushed back into the kitchen, and that was when he saw it. On the calendar taped to the fridge, on today's square, a shaky note written in his father's handwriting. Check the park. The letters leaned and dipped like they were drunk. Luke stared at the words, his stomach dropping. Maple Creek Park. His father used to bring him and Hannah there almost every Sunday when they were kids. Swings, a pond, a broken-down slide, and the best ice cream truck in town. Apparently, his father's mind had decided it still lived in those days. Luke grabbed his keys so fast they slipped out of his hand and clattered to the floor. He snatched them up, ran back out to the truck, and started the engine with shaking hands. As he peeled out of the driveway, his mind raced with all the terrible possibilities. His father falling, getting hit by a car, forgetting his own name and wandering miles away. The sky was getting darker, the town lights winking on one by one, as Luke sped toward Maple Creek Park, not knowing that this night would be the one that forced him to face everything he had been running from, the past, the pain, and the truth about what it really meant to love someone who was disappearing right in front of him. Maple Creek Park looked different at night, quieter and a little eerie, the kind of place that held old memories like fog clinging to the ground. The streetlights along the path cast pale yellow circles over the worn swings and the cracked basketball court, and the small pond at the center of the park reflected the deepening sky in broken pieces. Luke pulled his truck into the nearly empty parking lot, killed the engine, and sat for half a second with his hands locked around the steering wheel, listening to his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. Then he shoved the door open and stepped out into the cool air. "Dad!" he called, his voice cutting through the quiet. A couple of teenagers sitting on the picnic table near the playground looked up from their phones, their faces briefly lit by the screens. One of them, a girl in a denim jacket, slid off the table and frowned. "You okay, sir?" she asked, her voice cautious but kind. "I'm looking for someone," Luke said, already scanning the shadows. "Older guy, gray hair, army jacket, walks a little slow. Have you seen him?" The girl shook her head, glancing at her friend. "No, sorry," she said. "But we can help you look if you want." For a moment, Luke wanted to tell them no, that this was his mess and he would take care of it alone like he always did. But his chest felt tight and the night felt big, and he didn't have the luxury of pride. "Yeah," he said, nodding quickly. "Yeah, that would help. His name is Tom." They spread out across the park, calling his father's name. The boy walked toward the basketball court, the girl headed for the playground, and Luke made his way toward the pond. The grass was damp under his boots, and the air smelled like water and wet leaves. He walked faster, his eyes darting from bench to bench, from tree to tree. Every shadow looked like a person slumped over until he got close enough to see it was just a trash can or a bush. "Dad!" he shouted again, louder this time, his voice cracking a little. "Dad, answer me." He rounded the curve near the far side of the pond and saw a familiar hunched shape sitting on a bench under a dim park light. Relief slammed into him so hard his knees almost buckled. "Dad," he breathed, and then louder. "Dad!" Tom Brennan sat on the bench with his shoulders rounded, his army jacket zipped all the way up even though it wasn't that cold, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. His gaze was fixed on the water, where the reflection of the moon wobbled with the tiny ripples on the surface. For a second, he didn't seem to hear Luke at all. When Luke finally reached him, out of breath, he stopped right in front of the bench and put his hands on his hips. "You scared the hell out of me," he said, the fear showing up as anger because that was easier to manage. "What are you doing out here?" Tom turned his head slowly, like it weighed 100 pounds. His eyes searched Luke's face, and for a moment there was only confusion there. Then a small, tired smile surfaced. "You made it," he said. "Took you long enough." "What are you talking about?" Luke demanded. "You can't just walk out of the house and leave the front door open. Do you know how long I've been looking for you?" Tom turned his eyes back to the pond. "I was meeting someone," he said. His voice sounded worn and far away. Luke's anger stuttered. "Who?" he asked warily. "Your mother," Tom answered quietly. "We used to come here, remember? Sundays after church, when you and Hannah were little. She'd sit right here and yell at you when you tried to jump off the swings. Said you were gonna break your fool neck. The memories threaded through Luke's mind whether he wanted them to or not. His mom's laugh, the sound of the swings squeaking, the smell of sunscreen and melted popsicles. For a moment he could see her sitting on the same bench, younger and relaxed, his father next to her, his arm thrown along the backrest, a different man than the one sitting here now. "Mom's not coming, Dad," Luke said softly, the anger draining out of his voice. "She's not here anymore. She hasn't been here in a long time." "Yeah," Tom said after a moment, his jaw tightening. "I know that. Some days I forget the leaving part and only remember the sitting here part." Across the park, the teenagers called, "You find him?" Their voices bounced through the trees. "Yeah, I got him," Luke shouted back. "Thanks for looking." They waved and drifted away, already turning back to their phones, their brief part in his crisis over. Luke sank down onto the bench next to his father, the wood cold beneath him. For a while they sat in silence, listening to the rustle of leaves and the distant buzz of a car passing on a nearby road. "You can't do this, Dad," Luke said finally, his voice low. "You can't just walk out like that. If something happened to you out here, if you got lost or fell, I'd never forgive myself." Tom let out a rough breath that was halfway to a laugh and halfway to a sigh. "Forgive yourself," he said. "You didn't break anything, kid. That was me." Old anger sparked in Luke's chest, bright and sudden. "You're right," he said, staring at the pond. "You did." His father flinched as if the words had landed like a physical blow, but he didn't argue. "I deserve that," he murmured. "Probably more." The wind picked up a little, and a few leaves skittered across the path in front of them. Somewhere in the dark, a duck squawked at nothing. "When you were little," Tom began quietly, "I used to think the hardest part of my life was behind me. The army, the jungle, the noise in my head, the money problems, your mom's tough pregnancy with Hannah. I thought, okay, we made it. Now it'll get easier. I thought I'd finally be the man you kids needed." "You weren't," Luke said before he could stop himself. His voice came out flat and rough. "You know that, right?" Tom nodded, his eyes never leaving the pond. "I know," he said. "I had this constant noise up here." He tapped his temple with one knuckle. "Nightmares, flashbacks, whatever you want to call them. The VA said it was PTSD. Gave me pills. I threw half of them away because I thought taking them made me weak. Spent all that time learning to be tough, and no one tells you that sometimes being tough just means letting someone help you." Luke could feel his jaw clenching, his teeth pressed tightly together. He remembered long nights when his dad paced the hallway like a caged animal, his bare feet heavy on the old wood floors. He remembered his mom whispering, "Tom, please, you're scaring the kids," and his father's voice turned sharp and ugly. "So I drank instead," Tom continued. "Because that turned the noise down faster than anything. Your mom begged me to quit. I told myself I could stop anytime. I was a soldier, damn it. I'd been shot at. I could handle a bottle of whiskey." He shook his head slowly. "Turns out, I couldn't. You terrified us," Luke said quietly, his eyes burning. "You slammed doors, you yelled, you were like a different person sometimes. Mom never knew who was walking through that door at night. The dad who brought home donuts, or the one who threw a plate against the wall because the TV was too loud." "I know," Tom whispered. "You don't have to remind me. I see it sometimes. Little flashes. Your face. Hannah's face. Your mother trying to stand between us like she could absorb all the damage." Luke swallowed, fighting the thickness in his throat. "So why are you telling me this now?" he asked. "We've been living in this mess for years. Why now?" Tom was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because there's something I never told you," he said. "About why your mom left. About what I did. And I'm scared I'm running out of time to say it." Luke turned to look at him fully, his heart giving a strange, uneasy flutter. She left because she was tired of the yelling, he said. Tired of the booze. Tired of you promising you'd change and then not changing. That's what she told me. That's all true, Tom said. She had every right to go. I gave her 100 reasons. But there's more to it than that. Luke frowned, his fingers curling into fists on his legs. What else could there be? He asked. When you were 8, Tom said, staring at his hands, you got sick. Really sick. You remember any of that? Bits and pieces rose in Luke's mind, a hospital room that smelled like plastic and lemon cleaner, a cartoon playing too loudly on a small TV, his mom sitting in a chair by the bed with dark circles under her eyes. I remember being in the hospital, he said slowly. I remember you not being there much. Mom said you were working a lot. Tom let out a hollow laugh. Working, he repeated. Sure. That's one word for it. He drew in a shaky breath. Your appendix ruptured. Then there were complications. The doctors wanted to run more tests, keep you longer, do a surgery the insurance didn't really want to cover. They sat us down and started talking numbers. Big ones. Your mom started crying before they even finished. We didn't have that kind of money. I thought some charity or program helped, Luke said, confused. I remember Mom saying something about that. They helped some, Tom said. But not enough. We still had a mountain left, and the hospital wanted an answer. Pay or sign a stack of papers that basically said they'd delay some of the care. Maybe not the stuff you needed right away, but enough to scare your mom to death. She was afraid you'd fall through the cracks. He paused, his eyes shining. I did the only thing I knew how to do. Luke's chest tightened. What was that? I re-enlisted, Tom said. I went down to the recruiter and signed my name on the line for another deployment. They were offering a bonus for guys with my experience if we signed fast. That bonus was just enough to cover what the insurance wouldn't. I took the money. We paid the hospital. Silence dropped between them, heavy and thick. Luke stared at his father, the world tilting a little. You re-enlisted so I could get surgery, he asked, the words feeling strange in his mouth. So we could pay for everything? Yeah, Tom said. Your mother hated the idea. She'd held her breath every day the first time I was deployed, and now here I was, volunteering to go back. She said I was choosing the army over my family. I told her I was choosing you. I thought coming home with the bills paid would fix everything. But war doesn't make you a better man. It just hands you different nightmares. Luke looked out over the pond, his emotions tangling in his chest. He remembered his dad leaving for that deployment, remembered his mom holding onto him so tightly he could barely breathe, remembered the way Hannah had stood in the doorway, her face strangely blank. He'd always thought his father had gone because he couldn't stay away from the army, because he loved it more than them. No one had said anything different. Why didn't you tell me? Luke asked, his voice hoarse. Why didn't you ever say that's why you went back? Because I didn't want you to feel like your life was bought with some kind of favor you owed me, Tom said. I didn't want you to walk around thinking you had to forgive everything I ever did because of that one choice. And honestly, after I came back, I was worse. I drank more. I yelled more. I was so full of anger and guilt, I didn't know what to do with it. Telling you then would have felt like manipulation. Like I was trying to buy my way back into being your hero. Luke's eyes blurred. He blinked hard, but the tears still pushed through. You're not my hero, he said honestly. Not most days. I know, Tom replied. And I don't deserve to be. He shifted on the bench, his hand fumbling for Luke's for a moment, then stopping, hovering in the space between them. But I need you to know that even when I was doing everything wrong, I was still trying, in my broken way, to love you, to protect you. I sucked at it. The bluntness of that made a small, painful laugh slip out of Luke. You think, he said, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. He thought of all the nights he'd wished his father would just disappear, and all the mornings he'd wanted him to show up different, softer, more patient. He thought of the scholarship he'd surrendered, the life he'd put on hold to take care of a man who had hurt him and saved him and ruined things and tried to mend them, all in one lifetime. "I'm not telling you this because I want you to feel sorry for me," Tom said. "I'm telling you because this disease is taking pieces of me every day. I don't know how much longer I'll remember your name, or the park, or the smell of that lasagna you burned that one Thanksgiving." "I didn't burn it," Luke protested automatically, sniffling. "The oven was broken." "It was not," Tom said, and for half a second, they both smiled. The moment passed, and his father's expression grew serious again. "I don't want to leave this world with all this stuff unsaid. You're carrying so much, Luke. More than you should. You've given up so much for me. I don't get to tell you how to feel about that. But I want you to know the truth so that when I'm gone, you're not haunted by all the wrong stories we never fixed." The word, "gone," slammed into Luke's chest. He stared at his father's profile, the deep lines etched into his face, the way his hands trembled slightly when he pulled them out of his pockets. He thought of the calendar on the fridge, the red letters shouting Memory Clinic. He thought of the way his dad sometimes looked at him like he was a stranger. "I'm already haunted," Luke said quietly. "By every fight, every slammed door, every decision I've made since you got sick." "Then maybe this helps," Tom replied. "Maybe it doesn't. But at least it's out there." They fell silent again, the only sounds the distant creak of a swing blowing in the wind and the soft lapping of water against the pond's edge. Luke felt like he was holding two versions of his father in his hands and they didn't fit together, the angry man with the whiskey breath and the young soldier signing away another piece of his life for his son. "You're still not off the hook," Luke said finally, his voice unsteady. "You can't just say one, 'I did my best,' and expect everything to be fine." "I know," Tom said. "I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for a chance not to be remembered as only the worst of myself." Luke let out a long, shaky breath. He stared at the pond, at the reflection of the moon rocking gently on the surface. Forgiveness, he realized, wasn't a switch you flipped. It was more like this water, constant motion, sometimes calm, sometimes rough, always shifting. "I don't know if I can forgive you all the way," he admitted. "Not now. Maybe not ever. But I hear you. And I'm glad you told me." "That's more than I deserve," Tom said softly. He shifted again, this time letting his hand rest on Luke's shoulder for just a second before letting it fall. "Come on," Luke said after a while, clearing his throat. "Let's get you home. Mrs. Carter's probably about to bang on the door with a casserole and a lecture." Tom chuckled weakly. "That woman could scare the devil straight," he said. Luke stood and reached out his hand. His father took it, letting himself be pulled up. They walked back toward the truck slowly, side by side, their shadows stretching long across the grass. The night felt different now, not lighter exactly, but more honest, like someone had turned on a small lamp in a dark room. As they reached the parking lot, Luke opened the passenger door and helped his father up into the seat. Before he closed the door, Tom looked at him with a kind of fragile clarity. "Thank you for coming to get me," he said. "Even after everything." Luke held his gaze for a long moment. "Where else would I be?" he answered quietly. He shut the door gently, walked around to the driver's side, and slid behind the wheel. As he pulled out of the lot and headed back toward their small house on the edge of town, he knew nothing had been magically fixed, no wounds completely healed. But something had shifted between them, a small bridge built over a very deep crack. It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was something that might one day grow into it. Part 3 the next morning came too fast, like it always did, but something in the house felt slightly different, like the air had shifted. Luke woke up to the sound of the coffee maker sputtering in the kitchen and, for one dizzy second, thought his dad had somehow gone back to being the man who made pancakes on Saturdays. Then he remembered he'd set the timer the night before, and the ache in his chest settled back in. When he stepped into the hallway, he saw his father already up, sitting at the kitchen table in his robe, staring at the pill organizer like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. The TV in the living room was still on, low and distant, but for once Tom wasn't glued to it. "Morning," Luke said, trying to sound normal. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Tom replied, without looking up. "Brain's noisy." Luke moved around the kitchen, getting plates, pouring coffee, dropping bread into the toaster. Their movements were a kind of choreography they'd fallen into without meaning to. Usually the silence between them was thick with all the things they never said. Today, it felt thick with the things they'd finally let out. "We've got the appointment at the VA clinic this afternoon," Luke reminded him. "Memory clinic. Remember." He winced at his own word choice. Tom chuckled softly. "That's the funny part, isn't it? You keep asking me if I remember going to the memory clinic." "Yeah," Luke said, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "Fair point." They ate mostly in silence, but it wasn't as sharp as it used to be. When Tom reached for his pills, his hands shook, so Luke steadied the glass for him. Their eyes met for a moment, and there was something there. Gratitude, maybe, or apology, or just the simple fact that they were still here, on the same side of the table, trying. Work that morning felt slow and heavy. The sound of impact wrenches and country songs on the radio couldn't drown out the thoughts running laps in Luke's mind. He kept seeing his father on that park bench, his face lined with regret, his voice shaky when he said he might be running out of time. Around 10, while he was tightening lug nuts on a pickup truck, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He wiped his hands on a rag and checked the screen. Hannah. Again. For a second, he considered ignoring it like he had before. But something about last night, about all the hidden truth finally pulled into the light, made him hit accept. "Hey," he said, putting the phone to his ear and stepping out into the small patch of sunlight just beyond the garage doors. "Wow," Hannah said. He could hear office noise in the background, clicking keyboards and distant voices. "You remembered how to answer your phone." "I've been busy," he said, bracing for the fight. "Yeah, that's kind of why I keep calling," she replied, her tone sharp. "You sound exhausted in your texts. You always say you're fine, but you never sound fine." He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. "We had an incident last night," he admitted. "Dad wandered off. Went to Maple Creek Park. Left the front door wide open." There was a pause on the line, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Oh my God, Luke. Is he okay?" "Yeah," Luke said. "I found him sitting on a bench by the pond, like it was Sunday afternoon in 1998. We talked." He thought about telling her everything, about the hospital bills, the re-enlistment, all the guilt their father had been carrying. Instead, he said, "He told me some things I didn't know. About back then. About when I got sick as a kid." "You were always sick as a kid," she muttered automatically, then sighed. "Okay, but what does that mean?" "It means I've been mad at him for a long time without knowing the whole story," Luke said. "Doesn't make everything okay. But it changes something." Hannah was quiet for a long time. "I've been mad at him for a long time too," she finally said. "And at Mom. And at you. And at myself. It's exhausting." "Join the club," Luke replied. "We have jackets." She laughed, and the sound cracked a little in the middle. "I was actually calling to tell you something," she said. "I talked to my boss. I can take some time off next month. A few weeks. I was thinking of coming home. Helping out. At least for a bit." Luke straightened. "What? Really? Don't sound so shocked," she said. "I know I ran. You don't have to say it. But I keep lying awake at night wondering what happens if you burn out or something happens to you. We can't just pretend Dad is some problem you're supposed to solve alone." Emotion rose in Luke's throat so suddenly he had to swallow hard to push it down. "I'd like that," he said. "I could use the help." "You think he'll even remember me?" she asked quietly. "Some days he remembers the name of the mailman from 30 years ago," Luke said. "I think you've got a shot." She laughed again, and this time it sounded a little more real. Text me the details for his appointment this afternoon, she said. And Luke. Yeah. You're doing a good thing, she said. Even if it doesn't feel like it most days. He looked through the garage door at the world outside, at the cars parked along Main Street, at the blue sky stretching over Maple Creek like a worn-out blanket. I don't know if it's good, he said. It's just the thing in front of me. Sometimes that's all it is, she replied. I'll see you soon. At the VA clinic that afternoon, everything smelled like disinfectant and coffee. The waiting room was filled with old magazines and older men in worn baseball caps that said things like Vietnam Veteran and Desert Storm. A television in the corner played a news channel with the sound turned down, the closed captions crawling across the screen. Tom sat beside Luke, his hands folded tightly in his lap. He looked smaller under the fluorescent lights, his army jacket suddenly 2 sizes too big. You nervous? Luke asked. About what? Tom said. I already forgot. Then he smirked. That was a joke, kid. Relax. Luke rolled his eyes, some of the tension slipping away. After the paperwork and the nurse with the kind eyes who spoke slowly and clearly, they went into a small exam room where a doctor with gray hair and gentle hands asked Tom a series of questions. What year is it, Mr. Brennan? 1985, Tom said confidently. No, wait. That's not right. He frowned, struggling. 2014? It's 2025, the doctor said calmly. That's okay. Those details get slippery. Who's the president right now? Tom hesitated, then shook his head. You know what? I don't care about that one, he said. Luke snorted, and even the doctor smiled a little. They did memory tests and coordination checks. They talked about adjustments to medications and routines that might help, about support groups and respite programs. The doctor turned to Luke at one point and said, You're doing a lot. Make sure you're not disappearing into this. The words hit him harder than he expected. On the drive home, Tom was quiet, staring out the window at the passing fields. You okay? Luke asked. Doc says my brain's turning into Swiss cheese, Tom replied. Good news is, I always liked cheese. That's one way to look at it, Luke said. He also said we can get more help. Home health aides. Maybe adult day care programs. Stuff like that. You don't have to do all this alone, Tom said softly. You know that, right? I'm not alone, Luke said. Hannah's coming home for a while. She wants to help. Tom's eyes flicked over to him. She shouldn't have to give up her life, either, he murmured. I already took enough from you kids. You didn't take my life, Luke said, surprising himself with how sure he sounded. It just looks different than I thought it would. That's not all on you. A few weeks later, the leaves turned red and gold, and Hannah came home with a suitcase and tired eyes. She stood on the front porch, taking in the peeling paint, the crooked step, the overworked rosebush by the railing. It's smaller than I remember, she said. Or maybe I just got bigger. You got fancy, Luke teased. Big city, big job, big coffee. She smirked. You still drink that gas station sludge? Don't insult my barista, the machine has feelings, he said. When Tom came into the living room and saw her, he stopped short. For a second, Luke saw panic cross his face, that lost look that always made his heart twist. Then Hannah smiled, and something seemed to click into place. Hey Dad, she said, stepping closer. Long time. His eyes filled with tears so fast it startled both of them. Hannah Banana, he whispered, using the old nickname he'd given her when she was small. Look at you. You're all grown up. She covered her mouth with her hand and let out a shaky breath. Yeah, she said. You kind of missed the middle part. I miss a lot of parts lately, he replied sadly. She didn't hug him right away. It took a few seconds for her arms to move, like she was fighting through a lifetime of hurt and distance. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, and he held onto her like he was afraid she might vanish. Over the next few days, The house felt crowded in a way that was both overwhelming and comforting. Hannah helped organize medication charts, made calls to the VA about in-home support, and nagged Luke about eating something other than drive-through burgers. They fought, of course, about the past, about money, about power of attorney paperwork, but they also found themselves sitting at the kitchen table late at night, sharing memories of good moments, like tiny lights strung between all the dark ones. It was Hannah who said the word out loud one night while Tom slept in his room, and the TV murmured to itself in the living room. "Facility," she said, staring at the stack of brochures spread on the table. "We have to at least look, Luke. The wandering is getting worse. He left the stove on yesterday. You can't watch him 24/7. He hates the idea," Luke said, his shoulders tense. "He told me if we dump him somewhere, he'll walk right back out." "He might not be able to walk right back out," Hannah said gently. "That's the point. It's safe there. There are people trained to handle this. You're one person. You look like you're carrying the sun on your back." He rubbed his hands over his face. "I promised I wouldn't leave him," he said. "He re-enlisted for me. He ruined himself for us and I don't know. It feels wrong to put him someplace like that." "He ruined himself and he hurt us," she said quietly. "Those two things can both be true. But we're not putting him away, Luke. We'd be finding a place where he's not alone and you're not drowning. There's a difference." The twist came 2 weeks later, on a cold, gray Tuesday afternoon. Luke was under the hood of a car at the shop when his phone rang. The screen flashed, "MRS. Carter." His stomach dropped even before he answered. "Luke," she said, breathless. "It's your daddy." He fell. Time sped up and slowed down at once. He barely remembered driving home, barely remembered the way his hands shook on the steering wheel. When he got there, an ambulance was parked in front of the house, lights flashing silently. Tom lay on a stretcher, his face pale, his leg twisted at an angle that made Luke's stomach turn. His eyes fluttered open when Luke rushed over. "Hey, kid," he said weakly. "Guess I lost that fight with gravity." "What happened?" Luke asked Mrs. Carter. She wrung her hands, mascara smudged. "He went to take the trash out," she said. "I told him to wait for me. I turned around for 2 seconds and heard a thump. He must have missed the top step." At the hospital, the X-rays confirmed what they already feared, a bad hip fracture. The kind that older people with fragile bones didn't bounce back from easily. The surgeon talked about rods and pins, about rehab and fall risk, about how dementia made recovery more complicated. Hannah arrived with her hair pulled back, her face pale. They stood together in the hallway outside Tom's room, listening to the beeping of machines and the murmur of nurses. "We can't keep doing this at home," she said softly. "You know that now, right?" He looked through the small window in the door at his father, lying in bed with an 4 in his arm, his eyes closed. For a moment, he saw not the angry man from their childhood, not the broken veteran, but simply an old man who was tired and hurting and fading. "Yeah," Luke said, and the word felt like surrender and relief all at once. "I know." Tom's recovery in the rehab wing was slow and uneven. Some days he told the nurses stories about the jungle like it was fresh in his mind, his hands miming the shape of helicopters and rifles. Other days he didn't know where he was or why his hip hurt. When the social worker sat them down with a stack of forms and gentle eyes, Luke felt his chest tightening again. "We recommend a memory care facility after this," she said. "For his safety. For yours. It's not giving up. It's changing the kind of care he needs." The day they moved him into Maple Creek Memory Care, a low, brick building not far from the park where they'd talked, Luke thought his heart might break clean in two. He helped unpack the small bag they'd brought, putting his father's photographs on the dresser, taping the worn wedding picture to the wall. The room smelled like fabric softener and lemon cleaner. "You two gonna leave me here with all these old people?" Tom grumbled, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You are an old people," Hannah said, trying to tease, but her eyes were wet. "Traitor," he muttered at her, but there was a ghost of a smile. Luke knelt in front of him so their eyes were level. "We're gonna visit all the time," he said. "This place has a garden. And a TV bigger than ours. And people who know how to help when your brain gets noisy." Tom looked at him for a long time, studying his face. "I don't want you wasting your whole life taking care of a broken-down soldier," he said quietly. "You hear me? I did that enough to myself." "I'm not wasting it," Luke said, his throat tight. "But I am tired. And I think this is the right thing. For both of us." "You sure?" "No," Luke answered honestly. "But I'm sure about this. I love you. And I don't want to lose you on a set of slippery front steps or in a parking lot somewhere. If I have to lose you to this disease, I want to do it where you're safe." Tom's eyes filled with tears. "When did you get so wise?" he asked. "Probably around the time I had to start hiding the toaster from you," Luke said. They both laughed, even as the tears spilled over. Time did what it always does. It moved. Slowly and fast, all at once. The months blurred into a pattern. Luke worked at the shop. Hannah went back to Chicago but came home more often. They took turns visiting their father at the memory care center, bringing him his favorite cookies, playing old country songs on their phones, walking with him around the garden when the weather was good. Some days he knew them. Some days he didn't. Once, when Luke walked in, Tom looked up and grinned like a kid. "There he is," he said. "My boy. The one who fixes everything." Luke laughed. "Not everything," he said. "Working on it." Another time, Tom stared at him and asked politely, "You the new nurse?" The first time that happened, Luke had to step into the hallway and lean against the wall until his breathing slowed. Each lost piece hurt. But there were good moments too. One afternoon in late spring, when the air smelled like rain and fresh-cut grass, Luke sat in a chair by his father's bed, watching him doze. The TV in the corner played some old western with the sound low. On the bedside table lay the photo of young Tom in his army uniform and the one of Luke and Hannah covered in ice cream. Tom's hand twitched on the blanket, and his eyes opened slowly. He looked around, spotted Luke, and for a second his gaze was sharp and clear. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey," Luke said, sitting up. "You okay?" "Don't feel like Swiss cheese today," Tom replied. "Feels like, maybe cheddar." "Moving up in the world," Luke said. His father's eyes moved to the photos, lingered there, then returned to his son. "I've been thinking," Tom said. "In the bouts of clear air I get." "Yeah. You remember that night at the park?" "I think about it all the time," Luke said. "Me too," Tom replied. "I told you I did my best. Been wondering if that was really true." "You said you did," Luke said cautiously. His father's gaze was steady. "I think I did the best I could with what I had back then. But that doesn't mean it was good enough. Or that it didn't hurt you," he said. "I wish I'd known how to be better. For you. For Hannah. For your mom. And I wish I'd told you the truth sooner." Tears pricked Luke's eyes. "You're telling me now," he said. "Yeah," Tom whispered. "Before the lights go out." He reached out, fingers fumbling, and Luke took his hand. It felt fragile and warm. "You," Tom said, squeezing weakly, "you really did your best. Better than I did. You stayed. You carried more than any kid should. Don't walk around the rest of your life feeling guilty about the choices you made to keep me safe. You hear me?" Luke's face crumpled. "I'm not a kid," he said, voice breaking. "Look at me. I'm grown." "You'll always be my kid," Tom replied. "That's the way it works." He took a breath, his chest rising and falling painfully slow. "I'm proud of you. You turned into the man I wanted to be and didn't know how. Don't let my ghosts keep living in your house after I'm gone." The words sank deep into Luke's heart like they'd been waiting for a place to land. "I don't know how to let go of all of it," he admitted. "The good, the bad. It's all tangled up." "Maybe you don't have to untangle it," Tom said, his eyes drifting toward the window where the late afternoon light painted the wall gold. Maybe you just carry it different. Softer. With more understanding and less blame. For me. For yourself. His eyes closed again, his breathing evening out. For a moment, Luke thought he'd fallen back asleep, but then he whispered, so faintly Luke almost missed it. Remember I loved you. Even when I didn't know how to show it right. I know, Luke said, tears running down his face. I love you too, Dad. Tom didn't answer. His hand relaxed in Luke's grip, but he kept holding it, listening to the slow beep of the heart monitor, the hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of someone laughing down the hall. A few weeks later, on a quiet morning in June, the facility called. The nurse's voice was gentle and sad. He went peacefully, she said. He wasn't alone. We were with him. The funeral was small. A few men from the local VFW post came in their caps and stiff jackets, saluting the flag folded over the coffin. Hannah stood on one side of Luke, their mother on the other, flown in from Florida, her face older and softer than he remembered. They shared stories at the little reception afterward, some funny, some painful, some that made them go quiet for a long time. That night, after everyone had gone, Luke drove out to Maple Creek Park. The same park where his father had waited for a wife who wasn't coming, where he'd finally told the truth. The swings creaked in the evening breeze, and the pond reflected the sky in wavy pieces. He sat down on the same bench and let the memories roll over him. Hospital rooms, slammed doors, Christmas mornings. League games, whispered apologies, that last conversation in the memory care room. For the first time in a long time, he didn't try to shove any of it away. He just sat with it. The good, the bad, the broken. His phone buzzed. A text from Hannah. You okay? He looked at the screen for a moment, then typed back. Not really. But I think I'm gonna be. She replied with a little heart and then, a moment later, when you're ready, we should talk about your scholarship. Or maybe some classes. Or something for you. Dad would haunt me if I let you spend your whole life in that shop. He smiled through his tears. For the first time, instead of feeling trapped by the idea of what he'd given up, he felt something else. Possibility. Not because everything was healed or fixed, but because he finally understood that loving someone didn't mean erasing yourself. It meant doing your best, then forgiving yourself when your best wasn't perfect. He looked up at the sky, imagined his dad somewhere beyond it, no longer haunted, no longer lost in his own mind. We both did our best, he said softly. And we both messed up. I'm gonna try to carry that right. The wind moved through the trees like a quiet answer. Luke sat there until the sky turned from blue to deep purple, feeling the weight of his grief and his love and his relief and his regret all at once. It didn't crush him this time. It just settled over him like a heavy blanket he could still breathe under. When he finally stood to leave, he felt something small but real inside him, a kind of fragile peace. A sense that the story between him and his father didn't end with blame or bitterness, but with a complicated truth. That even broken people can love deeply, that care can hurt and heal at the same time, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is forgive an imperfect parent and yourself, then take one small step toward your own life, carrying both the pain and the love forward, softer than before.